Earlier in this lesson and in our last class, we've been focusing on effective speaking and listening skills. To be truly effective communicators, we also need to be good listeners as well. We're going to begin this section by watching a short scene from the movie Patch Adams. In this movie, Robin Williams is playing a patient in a psychiatric hospital, having a session with his therapist. Let's watch to see what happens.
My father died when I was 9. He was in the army. He wasn't home very much. 2 weeks before he died, he told me that in the Korean War, it felt like he lost his soul. All this time, I thought it was me. I've moved 7 times in the last year. I've had several jobs. Nothing seemed to fit. I don't seem to fit.
And when your father died, how did that make you feel?
I don't know. I was 9. It was like there's this distinction suddenly between you and the rest of the world. I looked around me. Life went on just like it did before. But it wasn't like it was before. My uncle helped. He would visit. He at least listened. And I thought, if I could light my own farts, I could fly to the moon, or at least Uranus. But if I couldn't do that, at least I could use my penis as a pogo stick, and that might be a way of getting around.
I'm sorry? Yes, that's good. Yes, well, I think you're making fine progress, Hunter. We'll talk later in group.
Thank you.
Now that we've watched that clip, before we go on and have a discussion about what things didn't go well, take a second and write down in your notebook a couple things that you noticed that the therapist did not do well as a listener. Some things that I noticed that he didn't do well was that he didn't have any eye contact. He wasn't even looking at Robin Williams when he was speaking to him. He also fiddled with his coffee instead of giving the speaker his undivided attention. Oftentimes, if we're playing with something or fiddling with something, it appears to the listener that we're not engaged and we don't care about what they have to say. He made no empathetic listening sounds, such as yes, or or I see. Those can be really effective to let the listener know that you are paying attention and you care about what they're saying. Lastly, he made no reflective statements back that showed he was hearing and understanding what the patient was saying. There's probably a few more things that you identified that we didn't list here, but that was a pretty good example of what not to do when you're trying to be a good listener. Now that we've identified what didn't go well, let's focus on what we can do to be effective listeners. In order to do that, let's think of a time when we had a positive experience with someone being an effective listener for us. What caused you to feel listened to? What did the listener do to help you feel that way? Take a minute and write down a few examples of that. After you've written down some of your own ideas, you can take a look at this worksheet. If you open up your yellow workbook to worksheet 2.1.4, it has a list of things that you can do to be an effective listener. Number 1 is genuinely listen. Try to quiet your mind and give full attention to the other person. This is actually very hard. There's a huge difference between listening or hearing and just an actual active listening. If we're hearing something, we do hear the sound and the words that somebody is saying, but if we're actively listening, we're mentally engaging with what they're saying. And a listener can tell the difference because of the way that we respond to them. Number 2, use positive body language. Give eye contact, lean forward, Have a relaxed body. There's certain things that we can do that kind of show the listener that maybe we're not engaged with what they have to say, or maybe we're not happy with what they have to say. Things such as crossing our arms or turning our heads or our bodies away from that person show that we're not really paying attention or not showing that we care about what they're saying. Number 3, observe the other person's expression. Observe the speaker's face. Listen to their voice tone. Notice their body language. This can be really powerful when we're talking to kids especially. If we're noticing their expression, we might be able to help them identify how they're feeling. If they're feeling a certain emotion, but they're not yet able to put words to that emotion, as the adult, we can look at that person and help them name that, and that can be very powerful for them. Number 4, be a mirror. Match their expression, body language, and emotions. This shows someone that you're on the same page as them. This is another one that can be really helpful when talking with children. Number 5, make facilitating comments. Show that you're interested with a word here or there. Oh, really? Wow, or uh-oh. Those can all be really helpful. While we do want to focus on listening rather than speaking, by interjecting small words here and there, it shows the person that we're engaged with them. Number 6, put yourself in the other person's shoes. What are they feeling? Try to see their side of the situation. That's just what we practiced in our conversation plans. Number 7, summarize. Using your own words, restate what the other person said. This can be really helpful to show someone that we actually were listening. For example, if your kids come home from school and they tell you everything they did in school that day, you can summarize it, shorten it, repeat back to them maybe the most important things that they said, and that shows that, hey, mom or dad really heard what I said. This also gives the other person a chance to either correct or confirm that you heard them correctly. And number 8, validate. Acknowledge and restate the speaker's concerns and fears. If they come to you with a request or a concern, repeat it back to them so that they know that you understood. A few more things not to do. Don't interrupt. If you're talking when they are, you're not listening. That, of course, doesn't include making comments like, or really. Those are just short interjections that show the person we're listening. Number 2, don't think about what you're going to say next. Try to quiet your mind and listen to what they're saying. This can be very challenging, especially for adults, because we're problem solvers, and if someone is coming to us with a problem, our minds are already running thinking about how we can solve that problem. Or if we're really upset about what someone's telling us, our minds are thinking about how are we going to respond to this. This can be a very hard thing to counteract, but the more times we practice, the better we'll be at it. Number 3, don't tell your own story. You can talk about your similar experiences another time. We all have things we can relate to, and there's a time and a place to do that, but when someone is in the middle of telling their own story, do your best just to listen and save your story for another time. Number 4, don't try to fix the problem. This one is tempting, but don't go there. Set another time to solve problems. This is just like we saw in the It's Not About the Nail video. Sometimes it's very clear to us there's a problem that needs to be solved, but now might not be the right time to do that. I would encourage you to take these ideas and use them in your next conversation that you have. Maybe just focus on one at a time. For example, the next time you talk to your spouse, focus on having continued eye contact. Or the next conversation you have with your child, affirm them by matching their expressions. The more times we practice this, the better we'll become at it. One incredibly important ingredient for being an effective listener is showing empathy, which we've mentioned many times before. I'd like for us to watch a quick video about what empathy is and how we can practice using it with others. As you're watching, try to think of people in your own life who have worked hard at showing empathy to you in your relationships and conversations with them, and reflect on how that made you feel.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
One of the main points mentioned is that the key to a successful relationship is connection. Not always problem solving or trying to fully understand what someone is going through. We all have different experiences and we can't relate to everyone in every way. But what we can do is let them know that we have shared in those same emotions that they are currently feeling. This is an effective tool to use when we are talking with our family, friends, and loved ones. We're going to end this portion of the lesson by wrapping up our learning goals. After listening to the content for today, take a minute and answer the following questions on your learning goal. You can refer to my example if you need some help coming up with answers to the last few questions. As a reminder, there will be another sample learning goal in the next video. That video will focus on effective problem solving. You may choose to write a learning goal about one or both of these topics. After you finish, please be sure to watch the next video in the series.